This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of, I don't know, a 3-part, 4-part, 5-part. We'll see how it goes. Series on grief. If you didn't listen to part 1, which we released last week, I opened up just wanting to start this series. You know, I talk about grief a lot in little clips and little snippets, but I thought it was like kind of interesting to dive into it a little bit more, to talk about the complexities of grief, to talk about, you know, being the griever and what that looks like, but also being the support system to someone that is grieving. And just coincidentally, like totally coincidentally, I recorded the episode and then I opened my email and there is my very good friend, Mary Katharine Ham, who had just written an article on steps you can take to help those that are grieving. And I said right away, I texted her and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And I'm pulling you in for episode 2. And so she is here with us. Mary Katharine, thanks for being here with us today. You are now officially the most regular guest on the Resilient Life podcast.
Nice. Well, it's one of my favorite podcasts, so I'm glad to be here. And I think this subject is really important. People respond to it because people don't know exactly what to do.
Yeah. So you had written 3 simple ways to help a friend in crisis. You put it out last week on March 1st. And, you know, I'm scrolling down and we'll get to it, but I scroll down and then I see my friend Ryan Manion and I'm like, oh, there it is. So, but I think what I'd love to do is, you know, why am I bringing you on? Why are you writing 3 simple ways to help a friend in crisis? So let's kind of, if we could just share a little bit about your story and why you are my partner in crime on being experts in grief.
Yeah. Grief gurus. Yes. Yeah. You know, it's not the thing you want to be an expert in, right? But if that is the thing that I can bring to the table and it is helpful to other people, it makes my experience feel like there's something to be gleaned from that, right? And that's important. So I, in 2015, I had known you for long before this. We had been friends since actually pre-beginning of the Travis Manion Foundation. Yeah. And I had run in some marathons with you guys. I've served on the board. And I had seen your family deal with grief, right? And what that looks like in the ways that are really tough and sad and the ways that are productive and good. But I hadn't had something like what happened to me until 2015. So in 2015, I was pregnant with my second child. I was married to Jake Brewer, we'd been married for about 4 years. He was involved with the foundation as well. And he went on a charity bike ride in September 2015, which was no big deal. It was a 50-mile ride. For other people, that might be a big deal. For him, it was not. It was a spur of the moment thing. He rode all the time. He was very skilled. And he signed up for this ride. I was out of town. And I was like, okay, great. We'll see you. See you when you're done. And then I got a call, or I started getting a bunch of text messages that he had been hurt, but people didn't know what was happening. But it didn't sound good. And I got in a car to come back to DC to figure out what the situation was. And about 20 miles up the road, I got a phone call from a law enforcement officer who asked me if I was the next of kin. And I said, yes. And he said, well, he passed away after this accident. At the time, I knew so little. I didn't even know if it was a bike accident or a car accident. Right. Because I didn't want details, actually. That's one of the things about grief for me that I found weird is that I didn't want to know anything about what happened. Some people want to know everything. I was like, I'll just wait a long time before I deal with that. So after that point, I had to get through 2 months of pregnancy. I had to raise a toddler. I had to deliver a baby. Had to have this baby and put my life back together. And it turns out you need a lot of support for that. And so I got to see a lot of different examples of people serving me in that way. And I know what worked for me and what didn't. And I've since then, like you, people will come to me and say, well, what do I do for someone who's lost a spouse? What do I do for kids who are grieving for a parent? That kind of thing. And I've hopefully over the years put together a few practical ways that you can do that, because people get understandably paralyzed by the idea of dealing with this. They think if I engage with this, I'm going to get sad. If I engage with this, I might do the wrong thing. I'm not sure I can handle it. And all of those things are legitimate. But the things that can overcome those legitimate fears are simple material tasks. That's what I found in my life. Like you got a deep-seated fear, small steps,
Yep.
baby steps.
Well, just to backtrack a little bit, because I just want to share, your Jake was one of my favorite people. You were a part of our organization, like you said, before it was the Travis Manion Foundation.
Right.
You were there with us down in DC as we were running the marathon just to honor my brother,
Yep.
not as the Travis Manion Foundation, but just as a group of people, like, doing something in those first steps in the grief
Yep.
journey. Like, what do we do? Okay, let's run a marathon, right?
Yeah.
And so you were part of that. And when you met Jake, you brought him into the fold, and you were the board member, but he was just as heavily involved in the organization as you were. And one of my favorite memories is after Army Navy. We went to the jazz bar across the street from the Union League. And I remember we were in there and we were drinking Moscow Mules, and we just had such a great time. And it's one of my favorite memories of us hanging out together with Jake. And it was a tough loss. And, I don't actually, I think you are actually the one who told me, because I was trying to figure out how I learned that he had passed. And I think you sent me a text.
Oh, really?
And yeah, because I was like, how did I, and I think you sent me a text, and it was like Jake was killed in a bike accident. Yeah. And I remember I then texted Kit, who's a mutual friend of ours, and listen, no matter what, you can be an expert in grief. You hear tragic news, you're brought back to just like, what do I do? Right. And so right away, the first thing, our mutual friend Kit's a nurse, and she was immediately worried about your health because you were 7 months pregnant. And she was like, oh my gosh, she has to take care of herself. We have to be there to support her health through these, and it was just, and I'm thinking you were still, I think, driving up you were down in Georgia at the time, right?
Yeah, I had gone from Georgia to North Carolina, then all the way up to DC. So it was 2 days of journeying.
Yeah. And so somehow I learned either from you or someone, I started communicating with some of your other friends, and it was like, okay, she's at Jake's parents' house. And so I was like, all right, I know where she is. And that's the other thing. So, one of the things is when something tragic happens to someone, right? It's like, and they're your person that you get information from, you start to have to find, like, we don't run in the same circle of friends.
This is true, yeah.
Like, you're my friend and you've got different groups of friends. So we don't have like the same circle of friends. Yeah. So I immediately got in touch with, I think it was Emily, who I knew was your good friend, but I didn't know Emily super well. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to Emily and I'm going to get my information from Emily.
Yes.
So I don't know, I DM'd her or somehow I found contact with her, and I'm like, what's the deal? Where is she? What, and found out where you were, and it was like, okay. And so right away it was like, what do I do? Yeah. I didn't go to Mary Katharine and say, what do you need right now? What can I help you? And that's the big thing. And you wrote about that in your article. It's like, if I could say anything not to do, Don't say, what do you need right now? Let me know
Yeah.
if there's something I can help you with, because I can tell you right now, they don't know what you can help them with. They
They
have no
don't know.
idea. They don't know what they need for themselves. And you have to anticipate what
Yes.
that is. And for
Yes.
me, I was like, okay, Mary Catherine is at a house. She has not gone home. And I also learned you did not want to go back to your house at
Hmm.
that time. So I knew that you had whatever you had in your bag from going down south. And so I went over to the TMF office because I know you love our gear. And I threw a crap ton of stuff in a bag. And I was like, she's 7 months pregnant. I'm getting big sweatshirts. And I just got on a train. I
Yeah.
got on a train and I headed to DC. I got Jake's parents' address and I showed up at the house. And that's what I did. And, I think for some people, and listen, I didn't know what I was walking into. And I didn't know I mean, I know you well enough, but like I could have showed up at that door and you could have said, I don't want people around.
Right. Right.
Thanks for the stuff. I don't want people here right now. And I was prepared for that. And if
Yeah.
you had said that to me, I would have handed you that bag of clothes and I would have turned around and I would have taken the train back to Philadelphia and I wouldn't have gotten upset about it
Yeah.
because I know that people need different things at different times when they're going through stuff like this, and
Yeah, I think that's one of the important things, and I noted this too, is when you're reaching out to somebody who's in crisis, and I want to get to those clothes because they were important to me. When you're reaching out to someone who's in crisis, first of all, don't be scared to reach out. Everyone's scared to reach out,
yeah,
and people will sort of float away from you because they don't know how to reach out. But I would argue that it's almost always better just to send something.
yeah,
Doesn't matter what channel you want to put it in writing, you want to text, you want to mail it, whatever it is. If you reach out, it feels better to that person than not reaching out. I would largely say that's the case. And if you don't want, obviously you're not saying how you doing, right? That's not the tone, but how you holding up is a great thing. Or just, this is terrible.
yeah,
I'm so sorry, right? It doesn't have, you don't have to have a solution. You don't even have to have comfort aside from being you. And then I always give people an out that says, you don't need to respond to this.
yeah,
I'm just here for you. Because people will, even in the deepest grief, like people who we're all socially conditioned to try to do the polite thing. Even in the deepest grief, you'll be like, I didn't send a thank you note for that. So
right.
let people off the hook for that kind of thing. And that makes it easier for them and easier for you. So that's like a place to start. And then with the clothes, that was really super helpful to me because the clothes were what you anticipated. Oh, this poor chick is 7 months pregnant with no clothes that fit her, sitting at someone else's house, right? Let's get her some very stretchy clothing, so that she can look and feel like a human. And we do have great gear. That's important. Um, in fact, it's funny you're wearing the pink jacket because one of them was this pink warm-up jacket that I wore all the time. And that was really important to me. Also, it was what I needed, like physically, practically. They also didn't have any memories attached to them.
Right.
So that can be a really hard part of grieving, is that every situation you're stepping into, and sometimes every pair of pants you're stepping into, has something related to this person you've lost. And that's a really hard thing to get through. So in those early days, I was just like clean slate, putting on these leggings. And you also have to do a lot of things when someone passed away, which is a thing I didn't understand until Jake died. But there are a lot of errands that have to be done. You got to go to the funeral home. You got to go talk to the lawyers. You got to go to probate court, or whatever it is, right? And those things, you can't show up in the thing you've been wearing for 4 days since your husband died. You have to put on something presentable. So that that was important to me because I needed something to run those errands in. I actually now, as part of what I think about when I run into someone who is in crisis, I think about where they are physically. Because sometimes someone will die when you're not in town, when you're not with the things you need.
Right.
And so if you ship like a matching loungewear set to this person quickly, where they are, they have another outfit to wear while they're dealing with all these things.
Yeah.
So I've heard that from a couple people, and it worked so nicely for me that I've done that for folks. I also just say, like, once someone dies and you're in grief, you feel detached from your old life. So people bring you casseroles, and that's lovely. Love casseroles. If you can schedule them for a couple of weeks, that's great. Casseroles are awesome. But if there are things that this person loved in their former life before it was disrupted that you can provide, that are simple, that are silly. A friend bought me like really pretty nail polish. So I did my nails. I felt like a human for 5 seconds. Someone brought me my favorite biscuits, like things from the era before that will make them, that are pretty shallow, frankly. Like, you don't want to go deep.
Well,
You're
I
dealing with enough
actually,
deep stuff.
yeah. So it's so funny because, when Travis was killed,
Yeah.
Krista, who's another mutual friend of ours, Krista went to the mall
Right.
and she bought me the most obnoxiously large pair of Gucci black sunglasses,
I love it. I love
like
it.
covered my
Mhm.
entire face. And she showed up and she was like, "Here." And I'm like, "Thank you." And I was so happy about these sunglasses
Yep.
because A, they were really cool, but B, she bought them for me for the funeral, right?
Yeah.
Like, here you go.
Yeah.
I put those freaking sunglasses on and I was walking around the house with them because I didn't have to make eye contact with the 50 plus people that were in my
Yeah.
house at any time. It was like they were my, shield. And it was
Yeah.
like, all right, I don't want to talk. I'm putting these sunglasses on. And when Amy, Looney, another mutual friend of ours, God, it's like
I know.
this is like, who also lost her husband. When her husband was killed, the first thing she said was, "I need a pair of sunglasses like Ryan had when Travis was killed." Like,
Yeah.
literally turned to her sister-in-law and was like, "Go get sunglasses like Ryan had." And she
Yeah.
remembered, she said, "I remembered you wearing those sunglasses." She said, "I remember coming to the funeral and being like, oh, look at those Gucci sunglasses Ryan's wearing." And
Yeah.
she said, and that was the first thing I thought, like, I need sunglasses like that. And we went right to the mall and we
Grab
bought
them.
a big old pair of Gucci
Yep.
sunglasses. And so it's like those anticipatory things, I didn't tell Krista to go buy me big black sunglasses, but she just knew. She knew
Yeah.
me. She knew it would probably get me a tiny little spark of joy,
Right. Yes.
minor
Just a little
sunglasses.
bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But she also knew that they were probably necessary for the days that I was leading up to.
Yes.
And so I think, a lot of it is anticipating the needs.
Yeah.
And so there's things like, and honestly, sometimes it's just not anticipating the needs, but like, what would be something that they would like, and materialism seems so shallow at a time
Yeah.
like this, but it is those little moments of it. I mean, it kind of works,
I agree. I
for
agree.
a little snippet, it works. Like this tiny little second where you're like, "Ooh, I like these." Okay,
Like,
And
oh, well, because that is a human feeling, right? When you feel so disconnected from your life at that point
right,
that if you have a reaction to something that's just like, oh, that's a cute sweater, you're
yeah,
like, oh my gosh, I'm me. Somewhere inside here, I'm me,
yeah,
right? And that matters to people. That matters a lot. And just like small comforts are such a blessing when so much is going around you, right? A nice pair of slippers, like a manicure, maybe that's what it is for somebody, right? It's just those tiny little things will help someone to just for a flicker think, maybe I'll be okay.
yeah.
Maybe there are moments where I'll smile.
Right. And so there's that side of things. And I think, so I think you have to again look for and anticipate what might this person need. But then there's also that step of feeling like, am I okay to be doing this?
Yeah.
And I think that, so just recently, my friend lost her husband tragically to a quick illness. And I had a lot of our mutual friends reaching out saying, I want to do something. I don't know what to do. I don't want to overstep.
Yeah.
And people started to kind of get wrapped up in their own, like, I don't want rejection in this
Right.
moment.
Right.
And there was a couple times where I was like, it doesn't matter if
No.
you get rejected, because I can't tell you this is exactly what she needs. I can say, hey, I know this worked for me, so
Yep.
this is what I'm doing. But I can't tell you that, like I said, I couldn't tell you that when I showed up at your late husband's parents' door, if you were going to say, if you were going to be the person that said, I don't want anybody here, go
Yes.
away. And I had to be okay walking into that situation knowing that. And frankly, I know that when you would have kind of come out of things, you would have said, you know what? Hey, right, I didn't mean to like kick you
Of
out of the
course.
house,
Of
right?
course.
And I had to
Right.
be okay with that. And if you never said that to me, it wouldn't have mattered either.
Yeah.
But you didn't kick me out, just to preface. But you have to not be afraid of rejection in moments where you have to anticipate what you should be doing and not ask what to do.
Yes.
And
And,
so I think that's like a big thing where I noticed that a lot. And I think it was because, my friend has 3 children, all school age. So there was a lot of parents involved in like
right.
helping with kids and what do we do here? And I want to help, but I don't want to overstep. Do you know what she's doing? And I'm like, just do it.
Just
Just
do
go
a thing.
just
Yeah.
do a thing. And
Yeah.
if she doesn't want that, she's going to say, I don't want that.
Yeah.
Thank you, but I don't want that.
Well, and the point that you make, which is like if you are worried about that, one, when I say people are scared to reach out, I get why you are. I get
Yeah.
it. And I still do it sometimes. I'll be like, oh, do I know this person well enough to reach out? It's like, and then I'll tell my brain to shut up and I'll reach out to them.
Yeah.
I get why people are worried, but what I tell them is the person suffering right now is so much more scared than you are, right? So it's our job to overcome in that moment and reach out. It doesn't mean you have to like lay your life down, right? You dip in and come out when you're feeling what feels healthy for you. But that initial reach out and offer of help when in the darkest days, they're so scared. Your fear is something you can just let's pull on those bootstraps. Like we got to do the thing. And a lot of this is like you said, reading how close you are to this person, what you know about this person, thinking through that. And then I like what you said, which is you kind of give yourself an option when you're offering something and you tell yourself, this is how this could go. And if it goes that way, that's fine. I'll leave what I've brought on the porch.
Right.
No harm, no foul.
Right.
Right. So I think that's a large part of it. If you need to give yourself an out, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And I'm
Um,
a person, so I know again, and people are very different on how they respond to grief. I know for me, when Travis was killed, well, there was 30 plus people in the house when we got
yeah.
there. So we never even started from this place of like, oh, nobody's here. And then people started showing, like everybody was already there. Then more
Right.
people just showed up. And
Right.
so it went for until probably weeks after the funeral, like there was always people in the house. And that brought a lot of distraction to the environment, which is kind of necessary because you need that distraction. But there were also times where, we're sitting around and I remember times where, as the days trailed into the nights, there was a lot of alcohol flowing and
Yes.
it would get to that point where people started sharing stories and they're laughing it would get too much for me. And
Yeah.
I'd go upstairs and there'd be 50 people downstairs, but I'm up in my room and that was okay,
Yeah.
and that's where I needed to be in that moment. But so there's a lot of that in the beginning, right? And I always talk, and a lot of things I was saying to a lot of our mutual friends, for my friend that just lost her husband, I was sharing with them because they were like, I want to do something right now. I don't know what to do. I know there's so many people. She has so much support right now. But I want to do something. What could I do? And I'm like, you could not do anything right now, and that would be okay.
Yeah.
Because really, like when she needs you to do something for her is going to be a month from now.
Yeah, that's another good idea is text in the moment,
Right.
email in the moment, whatever it is, and then put a reminder for yourself 2 months from now to check back about what people are doing at that time. Because about a month out, people disappear,
Yeah.
right? And look, the world is moving on as it should, but it feels very bad to the person who can't do that as
Right.
quickly,
Right.
right? And the resources dry up. And I was a different case, and like probably you as well, in that it was so public and big that my resources lasted a lot longer than a lot of people's did. And I have I have a friend in particular who did schedule my meal train for like 6 months. So I didn't go to a grocery store for 6 months
Yeah.
after Jake died. Now, I also had a baby and people would have done a meal train anyway. So this is like a long period. But if you show up 2 months later for most folks and say, I'm bringing takeout by, or I'm bringing a home cooked meal by, they won't have that. And
Right.
it will matter that you did it at that time
Yeah.
because they've run out of their immediate resources.
Yeah. I remember the again, we had a lot of people around for a long time and a tremendous amount of support. But I remember the day after Travis's funeral. And I talk about that a lot because it was probably the second hardest day to the day of learning the news because
Right.
it had been, like you said, there's a lot of things going on. It's like you're planning a big event. You just
Yes.
lost somebody. And then it's like, well, now we're going to plan and execute a
Yeah.
big event. And we want it
And
to be beautiful and an amazing tribute. And so it's like you're planning something.
I know
And
it really asks a lot of us.
yeah, yes,
It's
yeah.
it's a lot to do.
Yeah, I mean, we had a freaking tent company putting up a 100 by
Yeah.
100 tent in our yard. It was wild. It's you're throwing a big party to celebrate the life of the person you just lost. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we did. And again, every situation is different,
Right.
but you had the most beautiful mass for Jake that I will never forget. I mean, it was beautiful. And so again, you're planning this big event. After that next day, people go back to their lives.
It's quiet.
And
Yeah.
it's like it was this empty feeling. And I talked about it in the last episode. I actually had like resentment. Like I was mad at the world. When it was like, oh, I'm going to work tomorrow, but I'll stop by after work. I was like, screw you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to work.
Yeah.
Like, you can't go to work. My brother just died last week. What? I was like pissed off at everyone. And so it's like these like ebbs and flows of how you're feeling. And I know for me, I think a lot because in that immediate onslaught of loss, I think about the things people did that I have no comprehension of because everybody was doing everything.
Oh yeah.
I remember so much more succinctly some of the things that happened in those weeks and months that followed, where people kind of came in at that time and started doing things to help me move forward with my life, right?
Yeah.
Not help me in that initial shock, in the planning, and you need all that, and that's going to be there. But like
Hmm.
that stuff that came after was arguably more important than
Yeah.
and I think people feel this immediacy of like, I've got to say something, I've got to do something right now. And I think that is the big thing, like acknowledge it. If
Yes.
you know that there is like a tremendous amount of support and around that person, acknowledge it. Hey, I'm here for you. And like you said, you don't have to say, I'm sorry for your loss. Like this, acknowledge that loss. Like,
Yep.
terrible. What happened to you is terrible. And my friend said to me a couple days after her husband died a few weeks ago, she said, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I just looked at her and I said, you just are.
Yeah.
I
You
said, you just
just
are. And I'm like, and it's going to suck. It's going to really, really, like, I did not sugarcoat anything. I'm like,
Yep.
it is going to suck, but you are going to get through it. You have to,
Yeah,
uh,
there's a very trite thing that I tell most people who reach out to me. This is people who are dealing with their own loss. And it's gonna sound so dumb, but it's real. And it is this. you have to literally put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
You have to get out of bed. You have to walk to the kitchen. Occasionally, you need to go outside. I would argue about once a day and walk around the block or half a block, whatever you can do. Because to move your body in this world and remind yourself that you are still in the world and to be in motion is part of the process.
Yeah.
And it tells your brain and your heart that you will keep going.
Yeah.
Right. And that part, that was really important for me, especially being pregnant. And because I needed to take care of my body, I was like, I'm gonna, or my goals were get out of bed before 11. I had a toddler, so that helps.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people around to help. Get out of bed before 11. Eat protein, drink water, go outside once a day. That was it.
Yeah.
That was the goals. But that it does help.
I remember Heather Kelly, another one of our widow friends who
I know.
who I wrote the knock at the door with. She talked about, you know, every day she just picked one thing to do. So,
Yep.
you know, if it was like, I need to go to the bank today, her mom would drive her to the bank. She did what she needed to do. You know, let's say it took 45 minutes. And she said, and just that would exhaust me so much. I'd come
Oh
home
my
and
gosh.
sleep for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But I felt that tiny little sense of accomplishment of I went to the bank today.
Yes.
And, you know, and so you have to almost think about, you know, on the flip side, being that person that is supporting them, you have to think about like, it is not just a emotional trauma. It is a large physical trauma to your body when you deal with tragedy and you're starting that grief journey.
Yeah.
So
I
you
remember the fatigue. It's
yeah.
strange because you think I didn't do anything today. Now I was pregnant, so that exacerbated it. But there was just this feeling of like, there's so much going on and there's so much asked of you just for your brain and your heart that your body is just telling you like, oh, what are we doing? What are we doing? And it wants to stop. And so being gentle with yourself is part of it. And like you said, supporting somebody and knowing that that's part of the story. One of the things that I think is helpful for anticipating needs is thinking about what you bring to the table as a friend.
Yeah, that's a great.
So I have completely different skills from my friend Emily. My friend Emily brought to the table that she's just dynamite at organization, at administration, at details. As Ryan knows, I am the opposite, right? So I can schedule a podcast. So we got that going for us.
Yes, you did it.
But I'm terrible at that stuff. I'm terrible at paperwork, all those things. This is an extreme example. Emily worked essentially a part-time job for me for about 6 to 8 months to get me on my feet. And to this day, she probably knows more details about like dates and pertinent numbers in my life than I do because my memory wasn't working properly at that time.
Right.
But she brought that skill to the table. She knew she had that skill. So she was like, give me your mixed up files and we will make sure you're paying all your bills and getting your taxes done. Now I trusted her to do that. Obviously, if you're not close, it's not the same thing. But I would bring something different to the table. When my friend is hurting, I can't do that part. I know I can't do that part. But what I can do is I'm the silly friend sometimes, right? Like maybe I say, there's this extremely juvenile comedy that's coming out this week. Would you like to watch it on Netflix and have some popcorn and I'll bring your favorite food by, right? By the way, I recommend juvenile comedy as something to watch while in grief because it doesn't trigger much of anything.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm that person. Maybe I'm a person, now that I have this ludicrous number of children, that I say, I have a zoo over here. Can I just bring your children over to my zoo?
Yeah.
And let them hang out for 3 hours and you do whatever you want to do.
Yep.
Right. So that's what I bring to the table. Maybe you need something written. I can do that. Right. So think about what it is that you bring to the friendship that you can make this person strong in an area where they're weak.
Well, it was funny too because not that I'm strong in this, but like I kind of they were planning for the funeral and my friend was talking about I need to get in touch with a florist. Uh,
Right.
I don't know. Do we order flowers? How does this work? I guess I said, well, yeah, I said, you need a casket spray. And like, I knew right away, I was like, you need a
Yes.
normally you do a casket spray and then you do a footer and a header and you're going
Yep.
to have so many other flowers. You don't, people send flowers, you know, and she goes, oh, and I said, do you just want me to call and get the flowers? And she said, yeah. And so I called the florist and I said, I'm ordering flowers. And, you
Yeah.
know, we're a small town. He knew exactly who it was for. And I said casket spray and a foot of the casket and head of the casket. And he goes, man, you know your casket sprays. Like, and he had done the flowers for my mom. He had done the
Right,
flowers
right,
for
right.
my brother. And I was like, ew, how did I know that? But I just did. And as soon as she started talking about it, and here I am. And as soon as I got to the funeral home, I was like, where are those damn flowers? They better look good, you know? It
Yeah.
was like very intent on how do those flowers look, you know?
No, I think a lot of people underestimate the things we do know about this until like maybe spend some time with yourself writing down what you know about this process, right? Like if you've been through it before. I get questions about how to deal with the aftermath, picking an urn, or do I do a viewing, and those kind of, and like another important thing about this, and if you're the person who can do it, is when I was in a really bad place, having people around who weren't scared of me and my grief, who weren't scared of the weird questions that I needed to ask, was huge. Now, not everybody is that person.
Yeah.
I happen to be that person now. So when someone gets in touch with me, particularly I have people refer widows to me, and I say, "Hey, please ask me any weird widow questions you have."
Right.
And then like later on down the line, I'll get questions about dating because that's a complicated thing, right? So I want to be the friend who can listen to the weird questions. I'm not scared of them. My my neighbor across the street was a she now lives in Virginia Beach. She's a SEAL wife. So she knew about this as well. And when I walked across the street to tell her in those early days, probably wearing pajamas or one of the Travis Manion outfits you had brought me, and said, "Hey, I might not be at the house for a while because my husband died," she says to me, "I got you. Whatever you need is like, whatever you need to do is fine. I am not scared of this. I have seen it all. I'm a SEAL wife. In fact, if you want tequila shots, that baby is fully cooked. You're fine. Come to my house." But like that kind of fearlessness is important when you're scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember too, and I don't know if it was this neighbor or another, but you talk about this a lot. And I remember you saying it early on, like one of your neighbors just started mowing your lawn.
Yep.
Like
The
you're like,
best,
yeah,
the best anticipated need.
yeah,
I'm a single mom with now two children under or two and under,
yeah,
right? I'm not going to be taking care of a lawn. I don't care how small the lawn is. It's not happening. My neighbors across the street, different neighbor. I was very blessed on two sides. Different neighbor. They're enthusiasts. They love flowers. They love gardens. They're great at it. They would come over, mow the lawn, pull my weeds, and they would do it while I was out of the house because they're so kind and they didn't want me to feel like I needed to be out there with them. They didn't want to feel me to feel like guilty that they were doing this. And so they would like thieves in the night. They would come over, do the thing, and I would come back to this beautiful situation.
right.
And that those kind of things, particularly if it's a mom of kids who has lost somebody, just taking care of the kids is going to be her main issue. So if there are maintenance things that you can help with, my brother moved in with me. That's an anticipated need. My brother moved into my house with me and he fixed doorknobs. He helped with leaks, like he made dinner for kids. He learned to change diapers. Like he did the whole thing. But having somebody particularly to do those jobs that might be outside of the momming which is what you need to focus on, really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can like kind of dial it down in as the supporter of the person grieving, you almost have to just be totally comfortable with being uncomfortable. And
Yes.
if you are
Yes.
not if you are not naturally that person, like I don't necessarily have a problem with doing those things. Like
Yeah.
I naturally am just like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And even if I had not gone through what I've gone through, I probably still would be that kind of person. It's just
Right.
kind of in my nature, but most people aren't. So you have to be very uncomfortable with like, okay, this isn't something I would normally do. I
Yeah.
don't like to overstep my boundaries. Like you just have to do that. And
Yeah.
especially if you are close to that person. Um, and I've told people there are different times where I've told people, when my mom was dying, I wanted people in the hospital room. I'm
Right.
that person, like, again, I need that distraction. I need people here. I need people around me because it's distractionary to me. So
Yeah.
I went between bouts of just talking to all the people in the room and then putting my earphones in and watching reruns of The Office. Um,
Yeah.
those were like my two things that I was bouncing in between. But there was a point where the nurse came in and she looked at the monitors, my mom's monitors, and I kind of at this point I was understanding
Yeah.
the monitors in a different way, and I saw that my mom's blood pressure was dropping.
Mm.
I just turned and there was like 10 people in the hospital room at the time, and I looked at all of them and I said, I need you all to leave.
Yeah.
And they all just got up. They put on their jackets. No one said another word and they all walked out. And, my mom passed like 2 hours later. But
Mm.
nobody was insulted or
Right.
offended, and I've never had that conversation again. And I remember when I asked them to leave, I was like, oh, I feel bad. Like Krista was in the room. And I remember
No,
Krista,
you'll
like
do that.
grabbing
Yeah.
her stuff, like, oh my God, I gotta get. And I was like, oh, I feel bad. I'm like kicking Krista out. But I was like, no, you need to go. Like it's
Yeah.
time. Um, but again, it's, my girlfriend who just lost her husband, um, I've been helping out a lot with her son, who's, one of my son's best friends. And I don't say, "Hey, would you like me today?" I'm taking her son today. I texted her and I said, "I'm picking up Travis at 3 to go watch Maggie play her first lacrosse game. How about I take James with me?" And
Yep.
she wrote back, "Great." I didn't write, "Hi, wanted to see if James was available today." It's like
Yeah.
you almost kind of tell them, "This is what I want to do to help you," and they can say no to that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of being comfortable with being a little bit more assertive. You got to be a
Yeah.
little assertive,
And I think that the time frame is helpful too, saying I'm going to do this for this many
Right.
hours with this kid, and then I'm bringing them back. The other thing, and this is like, again, giving yourself the out and not feeling bad about it. Sometimes, and this happened to me, I would have to say, actually, I need the girls close to me right now because I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah.
I can't have them going with you at this point. Um, but let's check in next week or whatever, right? And if that happens to me, I don't feel bad, right? It's like you make an offer. If it's not the right offer, it's not the right offer.
Yeah.
But I get it's a dance. But all of life is, and
Yeah.
and making yourself uncomfortable is part of the journey.
I think this is just like one because I've seen it like on both sides, right? Like I have certainly since losing Travis, I was the griever. I'm still the
Right.
griever, right? Like you're still the griever. Very different in how we're grieving now, but like that doesn't go away. But I've also been on the other side and in the last several years, I've been the supportive person to that grief. And I think both sides of it are uncomfortable because
Hmm.
grief is uncomfortable. Like the idea of grief is uncomfortable. It's almost unnatural to feel that, and I think it's because it forces us to accept the reality of all of our fates,
Yes.
and when you lose someone young, when you lost Jake, when all of my other widow friends lost their husbands, the first thing you think is like, that could be me. That
Yep.
that could be me. And so you take this step back and you look at this finite thing, which is life, and you have those things that swirl through your mind of how quickly things can change. And, and so it forces us to be in this very vulnerable state for the
It,
people that are dealing with it, certainly, but also those that are trying to support those going through it.
yeah.
And that vulnerability is uncomfortable in general.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know how much your brain is supposed to be able to contemplate your mortality, right? That's we have many books written about this, and many religions based upon it. So I'm not sure how much you can learn this process, but having been there, I think you're right. It's being open to the fact that you are going to struggle through this, whether you're the griever or you're the person helping. And by the way, if you're a support person, as I said, one of the things you need to do is check in with yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you've been in the thick of it for too long and you need to tap out,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
I would just say come back at some right.
that's actually such a good point because, I've been watching my friend's son a lot and I'm happy to do it. I love him. You know, I I'll do anything I can to help them. But um Krista came to my friend Krista, has been watching me watch him, and she said she checked in on me a few weeks ago and she's like, what can I do to help you? Because I see what
Yeah,
you're doing to help our friend. And
right.
like, what can I do to help you? And I didn't need anything, but just
Yeah,
her saying that to me, I was like, oh, thank you.
yeah,
Like I knew that I kind of had that lifeline if I was like, hey, I actually need you to help me help our friend.
right.
So having that. And so, I think to kind of like close out on this, um, the one thing that I saw you do and you continue to do, like you say, you've become the widow, you're referred.
Yes.
Like I can talk to you, but you also assume that role yourself. So it's not just
Yep.
people saying, hey, Mary Katharine, I have a friend who lost their husband. Can you talk to them? You know, a few weeks ago, there was a 5 Marines lost their lives in a devastating training accident. Um, and I had posted about one who we had a mutual relationship with, and you texted me right away and you said, hey, I know I don't know this person. I know I don't know the wife. I want you to make sure that they know, that this woman knows that at any point, if she wants to have a conversation, I'm here.
Yeah.
And can you pass that on? And I did. And I passed that message along. And I thought it was such a, to see that all these years later, almost 10 years later, you are still that person that you understand what people are going through that have
Well,
suffered the same loss as you.
and I'm glad you brought it up because it's a perfect example of what we've been talking about. Because before, even though I know you so well and you know exactly what my intentions are, I still got uncomfortable and was like, I don't know this lady. Why am I sending this text? Am I going to be intrusive? That's the thing I worry about.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
word,
and
intrusive.
so, I think probably in the text, I said I don't want to be intrusive or anything, but if she ever needs
Yep.
anything, but that's my little moment of discomfort that I have to get past and then say, Ryan knows what she's doing. She knows what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes being the person, and if you are a person who has experience with grief, uh, being the person who's been through the fire and is still standing, sometimes it's just good for people to see that.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
pregnant widows who come to me, they look at me and they go, oh my gosh, she made it.
Yeah.
She made it. She birthed her baby. She lives a life. Her children are happy and healthy,
Yeah. Well,
right?
you were brought up last week in a conversation with my friend's parents who, my friend's parents,
Yeah.
and they know you very well and they've watched you. They knew you with Jake, they knew you without Jake, they know where you are now. And my friend Vicky said to me, watching where Mary Catherine is
Yeah.
brings me so much comfort for my daughter-in-law. because seeing that she made it through and where she is now, and like that's a huge thing. It's a huge
Yeah.
thing. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Um, okay, so one piece of advice, if I know we talked about a lot, but
Yeah.
what would be your most pertinent piece of advice for the person in the support role for someone that has lost a loved one that's grieving?
I would say you're less scared than they are, so put that aside and set reminders for yourself to help. That is because it'll just like you are going to move on with your life as you should. Set a reminder 3 months from now. Check in with so and so. I put reminders on my calendar for people's the anniversary of a death.
Yep.
I'm not perfect about it, but I'll have it in there, or I know in my head, oh, January, she's August, because those weeks leading up to an anniversary are tough. The anniversary is tough. Their wedding anniversary, if it's a spouse, is tough, right? So having those things in mind, if you're a close friend, and being there in those moments, even as the years go by, I think is huge. And those reminders can be early on in the grieving process, or they can be down the road.
Yeah.
But they just ping for you. We've all got a phone, and they say, "Hey, check in on your friend."
Well, it's funny too, because so Amy's late husband, Brendan, his birthday was just recently.
Yeah.
And I I text her every year I mean, I talk to her every day, but I still text her
Right.
every year. And I saw that it was his birthday. And for a split second, I was like, do I just do the anniversary now? Do I text on? And I was like, why am I even asking myself this question?
Yeah.
And I just shot her a text and I was like, happy birthday, Brendan, with a heart.
Yeah.
And and of course she wrote right back. And I was just like, why did I question doing that? Because that text to her wishing Brendan a happy birthday is probably more important now, 13 years
Yeah.
after his death, than it was that first year when 200 people wrote happy birthday, Brendan, to her, you know? So always think about that as the years and years pass, that, those dates, and I always say 1 year, 1 month, you know, 1 week,
Yeah.
every day without them is a day without them. But, my dad always says anniversaries mean nothing to me because there's no, my son's gone and my son's gone every day. For me,
Yeah.
those anniversaries, like, I don't know, they hit me. Like, I am the person that gets like, so think about that. And,
Yeah. I would say actually, and this is a practical piece of advice that I give to a lot of people, and to people who are grieving and to people who are supporting, which is on the anniversary of the death, if you're close enough to somebody, have a conversation about what they would like that day to look like. Because if they haven't anticipated it and it sneaks up on them, it can be really tough. I
yeah,
have had a plan in place since the year that Jake died, where I go and have a ridiculous, extravagant steakhouse lunch and have a
boozy lunch.
martini or two and talk to a bunch of people who are not my most emo friends. They're just like, they're going to goof off with me because that's what I want that day to look like. Now, other people might want that day to be very commemorative, right? It's going to be different for different people. And so, but setting yourself up for success or helping your friends set themselves up for success in that moment is a really nice thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, I feel like we could just keep going on and on and on. And I feel like I may want to bring you back so this was more about like that support, to that being that support person. I also want to dive in more to being that person,
Yeah.
and talking about some of those hard questions. If there's anything as we kind of move through this series, if you have some topics you want to talk about, you want us to explore, shoot me a message on Instagram. Myself or at Travis Manion Foundation, because we want to make sure we're kind of covering it all. And like you said, like ask those taboo, weird questions,
Weird
right?
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the weird questions. But this was super helpful to have you on. I knew, again, I saw that. I'm like, oh, this was pretty serendipitous that I was like
Yeah.
doing a thing on grief, a series on grief, and then Mary Katharine writes, what to do when someone is grieving, how
Yeah.
to help.
How
So
to well, and I'm going to keep writing about it at my Substack. And the thing is, there's so many stages of it
Yeah.
And I think, look, you noted, and we both sort of laugh about it, like the number of widow friends and tragedies
I know it
surrounding us.
felt really, I was like, and then her other friend whose husband died. And I was like, oh
However,
God.
I mean, I have a group of friends that are my widow friends. I have many of them. I do think that being part of the Travis Manion Foundation and a military community in general, the military community really has a lot of experience with this, and the military community is very good at physical support because the Army moms in my neighborhood, they know how to bring you a meal. They know how to be there on the doorstep when you need them because their husbands have been deployed many a time, right?
Yeah.
Being part of that and learning, as we say at Travis Manion Foundation, to struggle well, our attitude in this whole conversation is a testament to what having people in your life that can help you do that
Yeah.
does.
Yep.
So I'm glad for you guys.
Mary Katharine, thank you. This was great. Thanks for joining us. We will continue on with episode 3 of the series, talking a little bit more about being the griever and what that looks like. Thanks so much.